Right. So we're ready for another deep dive, and this time we're going to be looking at Scratch.
Scratch programming, yeah.
Programming. I'm super excited for this one.
Me too.
So just so everybody knows, we're going to be taking a look at this pretty awesome Google Doc that kind of takes you through the basics.
Yeah, kind of like a crash course on all the terminology and
Right.
concepts.
I think Scratch is really all about.
Yep.
Which is,
And kind of getting into the environment.
for people who don't know,
Yeah.
Scratch is this visual programming language.
It's so cool.
It's super cool. And you can make games with it. You can make animations.
Interactive story.
Yeah, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, really?
So we've got this great doc that we're going to be going through.
Yeah.
And I guess my first question for you is, when you think about Scratch, like, what is the most fundamental thing that people need to kind of wrap their heads around?
Oh, I think the main thing is that you're not actually writing out lines of code.
Right.
It's all about these code blocks. Oh, yeah.
And you basically drag and drop them and they snap together like puzzle pieces.
Oh, that's so cool.
And yeah, it's like a really visual way to create a program.
But how do you make, you're dragging and dropping these blocks, but how do you make them actually do anything?
Well, each block represents a specific command or action.
Okay.
So like it could be something like move 10 steps or turn 15 degrees or play a sound.
Yeah.
And the way you connect them together, that creates a sequence of instructions.
Okay.
So, one block might say move 10 steps, and then the next one might say turn 15 degrees,
Right.
and then play a meow sound or something.
And so is that what an algorithm is?
Yes, exactly.
All
An
right.
algorithm is basically just a set of instructions that tell the computer what to do.
Okay, so it's like the master plan that you're putting together.
Yeah, and these code blocks are kind of like the individual steps in the recipe.
Okay, cool. I love that analogy.
And these code blocks, they actually come in different colors, which is really helpful.
Because each color represents a different category of blocks.
You can tell just by looking at it.
Kind of, yeah.
Sort of what it's going to do.
Like blue blocks, they all have to do with motion.
Okay.
So things like moving, turning, gliding.
Gotcha.
And then purple blocks, they all have to do with looks.
Okay.
So like changing the costume of a sprite or making it hide or show.
So it's like, almost like a visual language.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool. So I get that you have these code blocks, but what are they acting upon?
So that brings us to sprites.
Sprites.
Which are basically the characters or objects in your project.
Okay.
So it could be anything like a cat, a spaceship, a button, a word.
Like the things that you actually see on the screen?
Yeah, exactly. They're the stars of the show.
Gotcha.
And you can either choose from a library of pre-made sprites.
Okay.
Or you can upload your own images or even draw your own.
Oh, wow. So it's very, very open-ended.
Yeah, very creative.
Yeah, that's cool.
So you can bring in pictures of your pets or, drawings that you've made.
I love it.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So you have these code blocks.
Yeah.
And then you have these sprites that they're acting upon to create these animations or games.
Yeah, and that's really where the magic of animation comes in, because you're taking these still images
Right.
and using code blocks to bring them to life.
Right.
So you can make them move, talk, interact with each other, and respond to what the user is doing.
Yeah. It's kind of like a digital puppet show.
It is.
Yeah, in a way.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's very cool.
And one of the really cool things about Scratch is that it encourages you to experiment.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, it's not about getting everything perfect right away. It's about just playing around and seeing what happens.
Like tinkering.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about tinkering and exploring, and that's really how you learn.
And I think especially with the visual interface of Scratch,
Yeah.
it makes it so easy to see like the cause and effect.
Yeah, you can immediately see what happens when you change a block or add a new one.
And that's something that, I've talked to a lot of programmers over the years. And that's one of the things that they say is the most rewarding part
I can see that.
of programming, is like actually seeing the thing come to life. And
Yeah,
and that's got to be so cool with Scratch.
totally.
So we talked about tinkering. I think another really cool concept is this idea of remixing.
Yes.
So can you explain a little bit about what remixing is?
So basically, remixing is taking someone else's project
Okay.
and then modifying it to create something new.
So you're building on what somebody else has already done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just about copying, it's about understanding how it works.
Right.
And then adding your own creativity to it.
So it's like taking a recipe
Yeah.
and then
Adding your own little twist.
putting your own spin on it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a great way to learn from other people.
Right. Especially, I would imagine, if you're a beginner.
Absolutely.
It's really helpful to see what other people have done.
You can see how they've solved problems and get inspiration for your own projects.
Yeah, and it fosters this really cool sense of community
Yeah,
because you're all kind of sharing and learning from each other,
definitely.
which is awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so we can't talk about programming without talking about debugging.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, the process of finding and fixing errors in your code.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, every programmer has to deal with bugs.
totally. So what makes debugging in Scratch unique?
Well, because Scratch is so visual, it makes debugging a lot easier
Okay,
than it is in other programming languages.
I can imagine.
You can actually see what's happening step by step as your program runs.
Right, instead of just having to look through lines of code
Exactly.
and try to figure out what's going on.
And there are even tools in Scratch that let you slow down the program
Oh, wow.
or highlight each block as it executes.
That's amazing.
So you can really see where things are going wrong.
Wow, so it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. It
Eh.
does, yeah, it's much less frustrating.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about when you're facing a really complex challenge?
Huh.
Like, let's say you want to create a really elaborate game or animation.
Yeah.
What's the best way to approach that?
So that's where decomposition comes in,
Decomposition.
which is basically breaking down a big problem into smaller, more manageable pieces.
Oh, yeah.
So instead of trying to tackle the whole thing at once,
Right.
you divide it up into smaller tasks,
Okay.
and then you focus on solving each task one at a time.
And so how would you actually do that in Scratch?
Well, let's say you're making a game where the player has to collect coins and avoid obstacles.
Okay.
You could decompose that problem into smaller tasks, like
Right.
first create the player's sprite,
Okay.
then make the player move,
Okay.
then create the coins.
Got it.
Make the coins disappear when the player touches them.
Okay.
Create the obstacles,
Right.
and so on.
So you're breaking it down into these really small,
Uh-huh.
discrete steps.
And that makes it much less overwhelming.
Right. I mean, that's a good strategy for life in general.
It is, yeah.
Like whenever you're feeling overwhelmed,
Totally.
just break things down into smaller pieces.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered sprites. We've covered code blocks,
Algorithms,
algorithm,
bugging,
debugging, decomposition.
decomposition.
Is there anything else that we absolutely need to know about Scratch?
There's one more really important concept, which is looping.
Looping.
And this can make your code way more efficient.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So imagine you want a sprite to move 10 steps forward.
Okay.
You could drag out 10 move blocks and snap them together,
Right.
but that would be a lot of work.
And a lot of blocks.
Yeah, totally. And with a loop, you can just tell the computer to repeat that move block 10 times.
Oh, wow.
So it's basically a shortcut for repeating actions.
So it's like you're saying, hey, do this 10 times
Exactly.
instead of having to actually do it 10 times.
And this is super helpful for animations and games,
Right. I can imagine.
where you often need to do the same thing over and over again.
Oh, absolutely.
Like moving a character across the screen or making a sound play repeatedly.
Wow. So looping is super powerful.
It is.
All right. Well, this has been a really awesome deep dive.
It has been. Yeah.
I feel like I've learned a lot about Scratch.
Me too.
And, I'm feeling kind of inspired to go and create something now.
That's the goal.
It is, yeah.
That's awesome.
So for our listeners out there, what kind of project would you create if you could use Scratch?
Oh, that's a good question.
Would you make a game? Would you make an animation or an interactive story?
I think for me, I'd probably start with a game.
Okay.
Something simple, like maybe a maze game or something
Mhm.
like that.
Cool.
Yeah. And then once I got the hang of it, then I could start getting more ambitious.
Right. Maybe add some sound effects. And
Yeah, definitely.
some cool graphics.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's about all the time we have for today.
Okay.
So to our listeners out there, go forth, explore, experiment,
Have fun.
have fun, and see what amazing things you can create with Scratch.
The possibilities are endless.
They are.
Yeah.
All right. That's it for a deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.